अब हिंदू अखबार के पूर्व मुख्य संपादक श्री एन राम।
It's extraordinarily difficult to come to terms with the death of Sitaram Yechury, a friend and comrade of close to 50 years. And I pay my condolences to Seema, to Akila, to Danish, and other members of the family. As the CPIM Politburo statement of homage pointed out, Sitaram's untimely death at this crucial juncture in our national politics is a big blow to the CPIM and a grievous loss for the left, democratic and secular forces. But even as we continue to grieve over what is for many of us a personal and emotionally wrenching loss, I think the time has come to celebrate his life and work and the cause and the values he stood for, because that is what he would have wanted. Sitaram, others have made it clear, was brilliant. He was versatile. He was charismatic. He was empathetic. And he was amiable. In the large outpouring of public tributes and coverage in the mainstream news media, the concentration has been on Sitaram's ability to reach out to leaders, many of them are here today, of secular opposition parties, and bring them together on a common platform. The array of political leaders assembled here to pay their tribute bears eloquent testimony to this important contribution to the fight for democracy, secularism, and the Constitution. But the other aspect that really struck me, that most of the media have missed, is what Prakash, his close comrade for half a century, has brought out in the most illuminating and interesting article I have read on where and how Sitaram would be most missed. This article appeared earlier this month in People's Democracy, and many of you would have read it. Prakash elucidates Sitaram's special and distinctive contributions over a long period to the ideological, programmatic and political positions of the CPIM. And this, to a political journalist like me, is of great interest. Sita's life was a model of integrity, commitment, sacrifice, and deep ideological and political anchoring and fortitude. We have heard from Prabhat and others that he was an outstanding student, and he was in those days, some of the best students in the country came to the Communist Party. From his JNU days, Sitaram devoted his life to the cause of the CPIM, the left movement, and the working people. It turned out to be 70% of his life. As a journalist representing the professional news media here, I'd like to focus on two causes to which Sitaram devoted a great deal of his attention and formidable energies. One is freedom of speech and expression, and in particular media freedom as a vital component of this fundamental right. The other, of course, is the fight to defend the secular and democratic character of the Indian Republic against the offensive launched by Hindutva authoritarianism. As the RSS-BJP-led Saffron Brigade began its advance in the socio-political arena from the late 1980s, Sitaram prioritized the fight for secularism, pluralism, and democracy in an intellectually rigorous, ideologically sophisticated, and passionate way. He wrote a number of articles after the demolition of the Babri Masjid. He focused on secularism in both senses. First, the equality of people professing all faiths, which is to say the fairness and non-discrimination principle. And secondly, the other imperative laid down in our Constitution, that the state must remain neutral and must not promote any religion. In 1993, Sitaram, with his keen intellect and ideological political training and practice, was able to look far ahead by turning his gaze back to a little-known 77-page book by M.S. Golwalkar. Guruji, as he was known within the Sangh Parivar, was the second and perhaps the most consequential Satsang Chalak or Supremo in the history of the RSS. Golwalkar's book, originally published in 1939 under the title We Are Our Nationhood Defined, sets out without inhibition the fascist core of Hindu Rashtra. Among other things, Golwalkar commends in chilling fashion Hitler's policies towards the Jews. As an example, India should emulate while dealing with its minorities. As editor of Frontline, I had the privilege of publishing Sitaram's original critique of the Hindu Rashtra project as a long-form article in the magazine in March of 1993. The same year, Frontline brought out his insightful and trenchant critique in an expanded and more systematized form as a 25-page book titled What is this Hindu Rashtra? In it, Sita laid out cogently and with singular foresight the great danger of the fascistic Hindutva ideology and the Hindu Rashtra project gaining ground in the socio-political arena with a view to doing away with what today would be called the basic structure of the Constitution. To remind everyone here, the Supreme Court of India ruled in 1973 in its celebrated judgment in the Keshavananda Bharati case that certain fundamental features of the Constitution, such as democracy, secularism, federalism, and the rule of law, are unamendable by Parliament. The Modi government has conducted targeted assaults on freedom of expression, media freedom and independence, and other fundamental rights. It has used anti-terror, sedition, and other draconian laws to incarcerate without bail or trial, and for prolonged periods, journalists, along with students, human rights defenders, civil society activists, and troublesome critics of the government. The post-2014 downslide in media freedom and independence has seen India plummet in 2024 to the rank of 159 among 180 countries and territories in the World Press Freedom Index published by Reporters Without Borders. The government has made a concerted effort to police and censor the internet, the social media technology platforms that deliver stream content via internet-connected devices known as OTT platforms, and also digital news providers. It has almost certainly conducted illegal surveillance against a large number of journalists, along with politicians, civil society activists, and other selected targets by deploying NSO Group's military-grade spyware Pegasus. Since the matter is pending before the Supreme Court of India, and I am a petitioner in this case, I will say no more about it. Shockingly, in the decade 2014 to 24, 19 journalists have been murdered in connection with work across India, compared to the 11 during the previous decade. And since 1992, the New York-based Independent Committee to Protect Journalists has been meticulously documented each one of these cases. Journalists not murdered in some private dispute, but in connection, the course of their work, and because of their work. Research suggests, I'm not identifying any party as being responsible for this, any single party, but it is clear, as research suggests, that communal and other forms of divisive politics and social polarization have made an already bad situation worse. In all this, the left and Sitaram, as a CPIM General Secretary, have been steadfast in speaking up for us, in championing freedom of speech and expression and media freedom as a vital component of this fundamental right. It was common knowledge among journalists that Sitaram, as a left leader, was accessible and friendly, almost always open to being asked the most awkward questions, and made good copy. With his ready wit, he could face the most aggressive or combative interviewer without any inclination or need to walk out of an interview, as two politicians famously did on national television. In a recent column published in Hindustan Times, my friend Karan Thapar, while relating his experience of interviewing Sitaram, observes that he was, quote, one of the few politicians who always stand by what they've said. In the 90s and early noughties, he writes, when it wasn't uncommon to be asked by interviewers to drop their indiscretions, this was most unusual. Let me end on a sporting note. People who knew Sitaram from his younger days knew him as a good competitive tennis player. I believe he played for he represented his university. But what I did not know until the other day was how knowledgeable he was about mine and Prabhat Patnaik's favorite game, cricket. Pradeep magazine, a cricket writer, posted on X, formerly known as Twitter, a link to a 2008 article on cricket written by Sitaram and published by Hindustan Times. The cricket writer, describing the article as brilliant, states that Sitaram proved that CLR James was right when he said, quote, what do they know of cricket who only cricket know? For those unfamiliar with the name, CLR James was a Marxist and the author of Beyond the Boundary, which is widely regarded as a timeless classic in the cricket literary canon. I read with keen interest Sitaram's longish article. It was well researched and knowledgeable. The cricket facts he was referencing and analyzing going back to the Bodyline series that made Bradman look mortal were scrupulously laid out with no hint of bias of any kind. But Sitaram, the cricket writer, had a firm point of view on how cricket should be played. The article was essentially about the spirit of cricket and how it was being regularly violated on the playing field with unwanted sledging, angry and insulting verbal exchanges between players of the opposing teams and other forms of unsporting conduct. In this article, Sitaram called on the International Cricket Conference, or the ICC, to ban sledging and verbal exchanges on the field. He wanted cricket to be played in its finest spirit because that is how he played the game of politics.